Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Education Series produced by the Australian Fitness Academy. It's like progressive overload for your brain. I'm your host, Tom Rock, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk about individualizing your training programs based on training age. And I'm sure I've sort of covered this topic in sort of parts over the journey of the podcast. But I was just reviewing just a recent study that came out, and I think this one relates to um, how important training volume can be and individualizing programs based on the client you have in front of you, not necessarily how you like training or how you've implemented programs before. You're going to have to change it based on the client in front of you. And I'll put a link to the study in the description. It's relatively new, so you might not be able to find the full version, but you should be able to find the abstract. But the study is called Pectoralis, Clavicular and Sternocostal Thickness Increase Similarly in Response to 1 and 3 sets of pec deck resistance training in untrained young men. So there's a little bit to the study. We sort of won't go through it like I would in sort of a study review one, because I don't think it's necessary in terms of what I got out of this this paper. But basically, they looked at untrained individuals, and they either did 1 set of pec deck or they did 3 sets of pec deck twice per week. So they did 1 set twice per week or 3 sets twice per week, and they looked in changes in muscle thickness, changes in muscle strength throughout the protocol. And I think, and it was an interesting sort of outcome to me, just because they come to some good conclusions that are probably relatively straightforward, but it's good to reinforce the idea, I think, over and over again, because it's something we can forget as personal trainers or coaches in the fitness industry, is about how hard or how much training you need to do in order to see results. And it probably gets skewed because if you're a coach or a personal trainer or you've been going to the gym for a while, you'll probably find you need to do slightly more volume to keep applying stimulus and getting your body to adapt. But with untrained individuals or beginners or people of a low training age, they don't need a lot of training volume to see results or to get improvements. So what the sort of the first takeaway from this study was that that they saw the same result or relatively similar results from people doing 1 set twice per week as a person doing as the 3 times per week. They actually did a sort of a the way the study was set up. They did so they would do one side of their body would do 1 set, and the other side of the body would do 3 sets. So it was an interesting study design. I don't know why, I just don't like these studies. They are relevant and they do show differences, but I just think working one side of the body compared to what the other side of the body, there's just so much room for crossover effects and things like that. But anyway, it's a common way to run studies for hypertrophy and strength training sometimes. But basically, I didn't see a difference between the side that did 1 set versus the side that did 3 sets in terms of muscle strength and muscle size. There was so the results were comparable. So if you've got someone, and it was over a 12-week period, around a 12-week period, there's 2 6-week blocks of programming that they went through. And I think it's an important thing to look at and consider, especially because a lot of the clients we work with in gyms or as coaches or PTs are probably going to be new to training or coming in from a very low base of fitness or exercise, or potentially haven't trained for a long period of time. So we'll sort of be in that untrained status. And I think this study really shows that you can keep the volume quite low in those initial 12 weeks. Again, probably after the 12 weeks, you're probably going to see better results if you start to increase that training volume. But there's no need to sort of go straight back into training and do 3 to 4 sets per muscle group 2 or 3 times per week. They'll still get results potentially, but they're not going to get any better results than if they reduce the volume and probably focus on recovery, nutrition, and what they're doing outside of the gym as well. So you're not taking all this time of them to slog themselves in the gym when it's unnecessary. So you can probably give them an easier role into training so they can build some good habits and start to see results and build that motivation before we start to build them into slightly longer or slightly more intense or a more advanced style program potentially. So full body programs with 1 to 2 sets, 1 to 2 times per week is really, really good for beginners. And I think that's something you need to sort of keep in mind. So training volume doesn't need to be huge, especially for untrained populations. So I think that in terms of this study, that was one of my main takeaways, and that it sort of shows that really well or explains it really well, um, which is really, really cool. Um, they did sort of say in the discussion section that they looked at other studies, and the results they found between 1 and 3 sets was similar to other studies. There was another one that looked at elbow flexors and knee extensors, and they found that they had similar results between 1 and 3 for the elbow extensors, but neither 1 or 3 sets improved the knee extensions, so the quadriceps muscle thickness. So potentially there's different volumes for different muscles that might work better. Again, there's potentially reasons behind that, given that you're walking or running all day, that might provide that stimulus, so your legs never really untrain too much. So maybe they need slightly more volume to increase muscle hypertrophy than, say, an upper body muscle like a tricep or a pec that can be inactive if we're not training it. But that's just sort of one potential reason why that might be the case. But it just shows that for potentially smaller muscles in untrained individuals, you don't need a lot of volume to get results. So I think that's a really important consideration. So when you do have individuals come to you and you want to train them, you don't have to have them in the gym for hours. Pick your exercises well, and again, big compound movements. Start to teach them exercise intensity and how hard they need to be training in a safe manner, and work on their technique. But you don't need to spend hours and hours or doing multiple sets of every exercise. So if they do a few warm-up sets and 2 good working sets, that's fine. They can move on to the next exercise and they'll get the hang of it. And then after sort of maybe a 12 to 18 week period where they've done a couple of good blocks of training, learned some exercises, learned some intensity, you can then look to maybe manipulate their program a little bit, put them on maybe a upper lower split, or advance them if they're into it, or if that sort of leads towards their goals. If that's not what their goals are, you can reevaluate their program, how you structure it, what are their goals, and how you're going to get to it. But that first initial 12 weeks with a client doesn't need to be overloaded with sets and sets and sets for certain muscle groups. So that's a sort of an important takeaway, I think. So yeah, just an interesting takeaway that I got from this study that I think is important to keep reminding yourself of when you get new clients. They potentially don't need to do a lot of volume, and if you overdo it, that's when they'll start pulling up sore, and it'll affect their next session, and then they are not going to improve. They'll probably maintain or slightly reduce because they're not allowing enough time to recover, because they're not used to that stimulus. Probably the other quick takeaway was that there was no difference when they did the pec deck machine. So it's sort of basically like a cable fly, sort of, but you're on a sort of a machine-based pec deck in an externally rotated position doing horizontal adduction. There was no difference in the clavicular portion of the pec versus the sternocostal portion of the pec. So you might find that more advanced lifters are trying to focus on sort of the upper pec fibers, which sort of the clavicular or different regions of the pec. Or some people don't. They just want full pec development, which is probably more general, which is fine. The pec deck didn't show any difference in these untrained men, so or untrained subjects. So it's in terms of working at the full pec muscle. This was a good exercise. If you do something like a incline chest press, potentially that's going to work more the clavicular portion, but that portion still grows when they did this pec deck exercise. So I think it shows that, yeah, unless you're really looking to specify, any general chest muscle that does horizontal flexion will work the portions well enough to see general growth of the pec area, which is sort of another little takeaway, I guess, that they sort of focused on this one. But yeah, I guess their main conclusion was discussing the 1 versus 3 sets, and that there was not a lot of difference. So, yeah, don't overdo that training volume for sort of untrained subjects. But yeah, just a quick little episode, guys, on that, because I think it's always an interesting one to reinforce and consider how much training volume we are prescribing to individuals within our programs, and how long programs are taking, and can we prescribe less, and looking at, well, how many exercises are we doing, and then what muscle groups or what muscles those exercises are working. So when we get to the end of a session, we can work out if we're doing too much or too little, and then look to manipulate that over time, or base it on the individual circumstances of each client, depending on where they're at. Hope you got a bit out of that one, guys. Nice quick one. If you do have any questions or thoughts on this, send an email to tom@afa.com.au. Or if you've got any questions or topics you'd like me to discuss or get my opinion on, send me an email as well. Definitely happy to chat about or cover off anything you guys would like to hear me chat about. Other than that, have a great weekend, guys, and I'll talk to you all soon.